Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Laura Hanson, and welcome to Connect My Brain podcast. We are so glad that you're tuning in. Today is, well, I would rather not say it's a delicate subject. Unfortunately, I think the topic of vaccines and now in the headlines of Tylenol, it has been a very delicate subject. There's part of me, honestly, that doesn't understand why. These are things that we've been asked to put into our body. If you question it, you've always been made to feel like you shouldn't question it. And there's even families that have been fired from their pediatrician because they didn't want to do either all of the vaccines or put all the vaccines together at one time. Now, this is an open topic, and providers everywhere are coming into the equation and giving their viewpoint. Obviously, people have had a lot of feelings about vaccines and have never been given the opportunity to actually express it. And that's parents too. So today, I feel very fortunate that I can actually do an entire podcast on this topic and give some information. I'm not here to tell you to do it or not do it, but I think it's very important that we have a place to get information and look at the information and really demand that the proper investigation is done. While I'm very excited that we have finally come out and spoken about Tylenol, for people that will view this, I want you to look at this sign in front of my computer. For the podcast audience, what I'm pointing to is that there has been a sign in my office for over 20 years that Tylenol is acetaminophen, and acetaminophen has been linked or put into a causal relationship of leading to some type of neurodevelopmental problem. And that was 20 years ago. I will absolutely say now I don't think Tylenol is the whole problem, but I absolutely believe that it takes forever for any information to come out and then actually be accepted by the general population. Lots of times, I think because I'm a chiropractor, if I tried to give this kind of information, people would look at me and go, "What is it that you know?" So, yes, I am a chiropractor, but that is the specialty of my doctorate. I am a doctor, and I have dedicated my life to credentials, to cutting edge, to deep research so that I can serve my patients as well as I can. I have several credentials, and I think it's because I am a chiropractor. And oftentimes, if you would say you're a chiropractor, the first thing anybody would ever do is go, "Oh, my back hurts." Well, that's a tool that a chiropractor uses to promote balance in the body. And I could do a whole podcast just on what your body goes through in many situations and the patterns that get set up. If you've ever read the book, The Body Keeps the Score, I think that is sufficient enough to understand that doing body work on somebody is incredibly beneficial. But in order to promote all the things that I do promote in my practice, like neuro and biofeedback, nutritional support, functional labs, I wanted to make sure that I did have all those extra credentials that would allow me to sufficiently and properly take care of patients. So we'll post the business card in the show notes, and you can see all those credentials. There's 7 of them. And that's not to toot my horn, but I do have a perspective on what it is that we put into our body and what it potentially can do to the body. And vaccines are absolutely something that we need to investigate and make sure that this type of an approach is actually done in a very safe way. So first, I'm going to present some information, and I'm actually going to share my screen so that you can go back and take a look at this stuff for yourself. And I will reiterate for the podcast audience what you're seeing. And one of the things that I think is very important is to realize the number of shots that people get. I think this is very important. And as we lead into this, let me give you this background. I was born in 1960. I had siblings. I had siblings that are older than me. So we are vaccinated between 1955 and 1965. I received one shot. Who knows what all was in there, but it was the one that went into your arm and then bloomed like a birthday cake and then leaves this very known scar on the arm. Back then, the research that is out there was really looking at how are these vaccines harvested? So we're taking a pathogen, an antigen, and we're trying to create a reaction to it. So it has to grow somewhere. And back then, it most of the time was grown in monkeys. The problem was not only the adjuvants, which that word means all the extra stuff that they put in there to make it viable, it's being grown in an animal. At that time, they did not truly research if the animals had anything going on. And therefore, whatever way this antigen was grown, you were also collecting everything that was in that animal. Just like when people talk about, chickens being really stressed out and the amount of cortisol that gets built up in their body. And this is actually going into the meat of the chicken and we are ingesting it. Same thing with growth hormones and antibiotics in our farming industry that is going to be in those animals. It is going to go into you. This would be no different. And many years ago, I lost a brother and he died of what they call multiple myeloma. That was the diagnosis, which at that time, my brother was only 47 years old. And multiple myeloma is actually considered old man's cancer, like 7th, 8th decade of life. And if we keep going down the pathway of, genetics and all that kind of stuff, we don't have any of this cancer in our family. And this cancer grows in the bone marrow, and those are blood cells. And when you receive a shot, it is not just, staying right in an area. It is going into your cells. It is going into your blood cells. And this was a blood-borne cancer. And my brother, it was 18 months diagnosis to death. And yes, I absolutely believe that it is because of the time frame that we were vaccinated in, and research that came out later explained that if you were vaccinated between 1955 and 1965, you were at a higher risk of cancer. And when I was in my 20s when this happened, and I'm 65 now, that was overwhelming. No, I'm sorry. I was in my 30s. I was in my 30s when that happened. But that was very overwhelming to watch. And I do believe that it's part of the journey of why I went the direction that I did. And I am about health. And what can we do to stay healthy? This isn't because I'm a chiropractor. And I can remember even during COVID, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution called me and asked me for my opinion. Why will chiropractors not get the COVID shot? And I got to be honest, I find that very offensive that somebody would take a profession and put that kind of label on us without even having real insight into our education, our furthering of our education, and how we practice. So it's not because I'm a chiropractor that I'm want to be healthy. It's I want to be healthy. And I found the avenue of chiropractic to be in alignment with my values. And so when I talk about vaccines, I don't want that in my body. I did not get one COVID shot. I want my life to reflect my body as a temple. And I want my body to be healthy. And I want to go into my golden years healthy. I want to be viable. I want to be able to enjoy this magnificent gift of a life. And that is truly what's important to me. So the things that I do, they align with my spirit. They align with the way that I want to live life. And I do believe there's lots of people that feel the same way. So it's not because I'm a chiropractor that I'm presenting this information. I'm presenting this information because I want you to have resources and I want you to make an educated decision for you, regardless of what that decision is. I choose not to. If you choose to vaccine, that is your right. I just don't believe that we should have people forcing us to do something that is really not in the best interest of a body. And when we, one of the earliest things that I talked about in practice was even if you look at the medical doctor curriculum, and if you look at if somebody is immune compromised, you should not put these vaccines into their body at that time. And you can go on the platform Children's Health Defense and see story after story, stories that are current, where children have gone in and they've gone into their wellness visit. And because they were behind, but they got into their wellness visit and there was actually things going on like constipation and congestion in an infant. And they said, no big deal. You can still have the shot. Shots, plural. And that in particular little person actually died that day. So these are real stories. These are real things that have happened to people. And I believe that the argument is, hey, hold on. Let's do research. Let's do proper research. So let's look at a few things. So one of the screens that I have up is the CDC recommended vaccine schedule, 1986 versus 2019. And this is different now because COVID shots have been added. This is 2025. But I want you to look at the difference. In 1986, it was 12 shots, 25 antigens, and 8 diseases. 2019, 54 shots, 70 antigens, and 16 diseases. Now, I want to really break down what that really means. It's the time frame and the adjuvants. And again, that word means all the extra things that are added, and we'll hit a screen on that in a minute, okay? But you're giving shots to newborn babies up to toddlers in these time frames. And the immune system is actually being shaped by what the exposure is. And the exposure is the 54 shots, 70 antigens, 16 diseases, and all the chemicals that are added. Now, I've done multiple podcasts on the developmental windows of children. So, depending upon the state of health mom and dad were in, is also going to play a huge part at conception as to how that baby is going to develop in the womb. Now, then you come out of the womb. How did you get out? Was it a C-section where I'm going to put that kind of stuff in my bucket? And none of this is judgment, but you have to take it into consideration. If a child doesn't come out uninterrupted and through that birth canal, getting the exposure of mom's flora, that child's immune system is already at risk. If mom and dad go into the conception and they really don't know their state of health, the baby's neuroimmune connection is interrupted. And what that means is how my brain is growing in the womb is going to be impacted by the environment that I'm growing in. And that environment, while it's mama's womb, it has come together through mom and dad. We have to be able to look at these connections. And as that brain is developing, that's the neurology. As I'm bathed in that environment, my immune system is already being exposed. Neuroimmune. So while these windows of development are coming on, I am being shaped by those influences. And then you come out of the womb and it's age 2 for your gut. What happened between birth and 2? Well, there's all the vaccines, any antibiotics, putting, large protein molecules into a body that's not ready for them, meaning how did you feed your baby? All of those things influence how I am going to get wired up, how I am going to develop. The bodies keep growing, but it's kind of like when I talked about a traumatic brain injury. It's actually an invisible injury because you can't see it. You can't see it until whatever it is that tips the bucket, whatever it is that mom took during her pregnancy, like Tylenol. And what happens, and I'm sure you've heard, that it disrupts glutathione. That's been sitting in my office for over 20 years. We've known that about acetaminophen. And it's not to make Tylenol feel bad as a company. It's the wrong thing to put into a body. And glutathione is your master antioxidant. We're talking about the protection down at a cellular level. And then if it impacts the gut and the liver, well, look at all these kids that have eczema, liver toxicity or liver congestion. When the liver can't filter, the skin becomes that second filtering system. Again, it's not about who can I put blame on. It is about it takes too long for information to come to the surface so that we can actually help people. Go back and listen to the podcast on red dye. That one's been known for over 35 years. This is what I mean by it takes too long for things to come to the surface and really make sure that we are helping people. If this is the role we've taken in our career, well, I have. And there's a lot of providers that have. We want to be able to give the right information. So people like me, chiropractors, can give you the right information. And I know a lot of them that do really stay strictly to the musculoskeletal frame, but they will tell you, I've got a really good colleague that dives deep into this stuff. And I'm going to recommend that you go see her or him. So it's whatever the specialty is. But we've got to be okay with receiving information. All right. So I'm going to see if no, it doesn't repopulate. So let me go back. Okay. This one is this one here. Okay. So now and we'll put the links in the show notes. Okay. So that was the entire schedule just as of 2019. And it is more now because of COVID. Okay. So this one here, I wanted to see what the safety part of the vaccines, because this is where a lot of people get uncomfortable thinking, you mean they really haven't done thorough investigation? And the answer, unfortunately, is no. So this is from the Institute of Medicine, and studies designed to examine the long-term effects of the cumulative number of vaccines. So that's at 70 shots, right? Or 54 shots, or other aspects of the immunization schedule have not been conducted. Okay. Studies designed to examine the long-term effects of the number of vaccines that are in that schedule. Those studies have not been done. That's from the Institute of Medicine. Who is the Institute of Medicine? It's arguably the most prestigious medical organization in the United States. The Committee on the Assessment of Studies of Health Outcomes related to the recommended childhood immunization schedule, Board on Population and Public Health Practices, also confirms the studies have not been done. So this is the problem, is the exposure to multiple vaccines through the first 23 months of life, when all those developmental windows are open. Is there an increased risk for infection not targeted by the vaccine? So there is a lot of information out there. I'm also going to highlight a book, two, as a matter of fact. I'll show the first one. This is Vaccines, a Reappraisal. Again, we'll put this stuff in the show notes. This is by Dr. Richard Markowitz, and there's a foreword in there by Mary Holland. And this one will give you some more information about rethinking the vaccines. And again, my purpose in doing this podcast, I'm not trying to make anybody feel bad. I am trying to provide information. And if you really educate yourself and you decide that vaccines are still what you want to do, I support you, because I want to be supported for my view. I don't think this should create discord. We should talk about these things. Now, this is another book called Turtles All the Way Down, Vaccine Science and Myth. I bring this forward because apparently there is another book out there that sounds similar. And I just want you to be aware of that piece of information. So Turtles All the Way Down, Vaccine Science and Myth, also forwarded by Mary Holland. So look for those key things. And plus we'll put this in the show notes. This is also available on Audibles. And it's a read, meaning it's a thick read. But I know one suggestion that I heard from someone I thought was really good is they combined the read with the Audible so that they could get through it. What's interesting about this book is the authors are anonymous. And the reason they're anonymous is because they didn't want to have people come back at them and destroy their names and careers, which that is what has happened. And Dr. Andrew Wakefield is probably the number one person. I saw this man at a conference 28 years ago. I've been in practice 30 years, and it was one of the first conferences that I went to. He was the first one that started investigating information that related to gut problems in children that parents were saying happened after the MMR vaccine. When parents came to him, he literally said, I don't know anything about vaccines causing gut problems. And the parents said to him, you do know the gut. Would you at least look at my child? And he did biopsies on the guts. And what he found was little tumors in the gut or little growths in the gut. And when he biopsied them and looked inside, there were remnants of the MMR vaccine. And as a doctor, a responsible doctor, a scientist, he brought this to his hospital and said, we got to look at this. And they kicked him out. They took his license. This is not where we need to be as a society, that if we see something, if you bring it forward, you're running the risk of having somebody just ruin your name, your career. This is why I started the podcast with, I'm so excited that I finally can talk about this, because I had one podcast that was published up on YouTube during COVID, and I made some comments, and I was censored, and YouTube sent it to me and said, if you don't, basically stop this, we're taking down your channel. This isn't right. We need to be able to talk about what's going on. I believe we are at a critical point, and we're losing a generation plus of people with the number of children that are not developing as expected. And honestly, I would not call all of it autism, because the patterns are very common, where the majority, not all, but the majority is this regression of neurodevelopment. It's not always something the child is born with. In fact, I just had a couple in here the other day with their son saying at his birth, he was so focused and attentive. His eyes were open and he was looking around. And now when I always ask a mother, what does your gut tell you? And mom said, we lost him after the MMR vaccine. And this is also, if you happen to listen to the MAHA and autism presentation, it was a 5-hour presentation. There were parents on there, and they were saying the same thing. Again, I'm not trying to say we shouldn't have a vaccine schedule. What I am saying is that there is a problem with the current one, and we need to investigate it properly. And we need to see what is leading all of these children into neurodevelopmental compromise. I've been practicing 30 years. The stories I could tell you of where it started 30 years ago, just some quirkiness in kids, to where there's kids today that can't even make eye contact. They're sick all the time. And if this is what is happening to our youth, they're being programmed by the developmental windows that their bodies and their brain will only know sickness. So I'd like to highlight this particular page for you. 54% of our youth are in a chronically ill state. 4 in 10 kids, depression. 1 in 5, obesity. 1 in 5, suicidal thoughts. 1 in 6, developmental disorders. 1 in 10, anxiety. 1 in 10 ADHD, 1 in 12 asthma, 1 in 13 food allergies, 1 in 36 autism, which I think that number is actually lower now, 1 in 225 cancer by the age of 20. We're losing our children. And yes, I'm in the fight to try to educate, to try to bring this information forward and what certain things, certain lifestyle choices, certain practices may not be the greatest option for your child. We will have another podcast on artificial intelligence. I blend some of that stuff in, but you have parents right now addressing Congress on the dangers of AI and how two parents, two different families, their child committed suicide, and the suicide note was actually written by ChatGPT. We've got to wake up. We have to wake up. So what causes some providers to go into a certain way? So a certain practice. So I have mentioned earlier in the podcast that some families, if they went to their pediatrician and they said, I don't want to vaccinate my kid, they were actually fired from the practice, which honestly, that just blows my mind that anybody that would go into healthcare to serve would have that kind of an attitude. But unfortunately, there are reasons why that people do certain things. So here is another share where we are looking at the incentivizing of pediatricians. And if we look at the things that go on during that time, there are financial incentives. We get this well child visit. There is 11 that you can have every year. And if you are recommending the CDC's vaccine schedule, there are incentives for you. And unfortunately, some pediatricians, not all, are looking at that because if you don't follow what they tell you to do, you're fired. So you have to be able to look at some of these situations and say, is that really what's going on? Unfortunately, I do believe people make decisions in life that is going to only look at a financial benefit. And that's unfortunate, but it does happen. The other thing that I really want to highlight is what am I talking about when I say adjuvants? And again, that is all the extra stuff that is in vaccines. So you may think that mercury is completely out, and unfortunately, that's not true. Flu vaccines, as well as anything that's more than one antigen, like MMR, will still use mercury as a carrier. So we have also aluminum. Aluminum has to be excreted through the kidneys. We now have more children having kidney stones than ever before. There's antibiotics. There's egg protein. Now, I can tell you this because I do lab work in my office. And one of the reasons why I do food sensitivity is because there is such a relationship between any child that's had a vaccine or their parent had vaccines. Now, remember, what's in mom and dad also gets carried to the baby. I have actually done heavy metal testing on children that were not vaccinated, but the parent was vaccinated, and the child's heavy metal looks just like the parent. So we would do a test on both to be able to see were these things carried over. Now I'm going to highlight something in just a minute, but kids that have been vaccinated, they've been exposed to the vaccine and all of the contents with egg protein, and it's typically chicken eggs. This doesn't mean that you'll get rashes and hives, but it could be an IgG response, which is a response that has inflammatory reactions that could go on 5 to 7 days in the body. So lots of times here at Connect My Brain, when we're working on the health and wellness of this child, we're going to make that recommendation. Take it out, because if you don't lower the body burden, it can't change. So there is formaldehyde, MSG, squalene, gelatin, polysorbate 80, as well as aborted fetal tissue. These are adjuvants that are in the vaccine concoction or cocktail. These are toxic to the body. So it's not just about doing an antigen antibody reaction. Now, step back for a second and look at your child's bucket for a minute. Maybe you're hearing my podcast for the very first time. There's a lot. I think I've done now about 160, I think. Marcy will help us with that one. Marcy is my podcast manager, and she's wonderful. But let's look at the whole bucket, because this is what it really means. We have to stop making decisions just in the immediate time. What is in that child's bucket? What was in your bucket when you conceived your baby? What has gone on in these first few years of life when these developmental windows are wide open? Is your child truly a candidate to have that type of a shot put into their body? Now, the same thing is true for other things that we do, other types of therapies that are about breaking patterns. It's always about, regardless of the way that you go. Let me give you an example. So we have several children that have very high strep antibodies. We don't dive in and start lowering strep bacteria immediately. We prepare the body. They go through an entire gut cleanse. They go through even some genetic testing. Where do they need support? And now I'm so excited to introduce that we're going to be doing genomic testing, so what's that? So it's not just about you, right? It's not about if you gave the shot or not, but what's passed down. These are called de novo genes, DENOVO. And what this is all about is ancestral, generational passing down, as well as here's this genetic code in this individual, but now they're exposed to a whole new environment and things are changing. And genomic testing is changing the game plan and really helping us personalize and identify what this particular individual really needs. You can get exposed or hear about different programs, and you might, off on your own, try something. And then you feel like, yeah, but it didn't work for me. And there's other people that feel the same way. But that's why this testing is really helping us figure out that personalization about that individual child and what that individual child needs in order to be successful, in order to regenerate change, in order to recover. Connect My Brain is dedicated to the personalization for every child that comes through our door. Believe it or not, we have some adults that come in here too. I'm known for working on traumatic brain injury. I'm known for neuro and biofeedback. Adults are finding these services as well. We will definitely welcome you in. But the faster that I can get to a child, it really improves the percent of chance to really have a recovery. Connect My Brain has many options for you. Maybe you are just hearing this podcast for the very first time. So I want you to check out on our website. We have what's called the C&B membership. And it is a very modest priced little membership for you to dip your toe in and get to know us. So I would imagine that October's code is going to be October 2025. I'm not sure, but we'll put it in the show notes. If you put that code in there, you'll get $5 off and it's $14.99 a month. And in that, you get to be involved in Mom's Corner. We welcome dads too, but we really like that name. We do a lot of posting in there. Our moms post in there as well. So you're now part of a community. You get to be part of a private podcast. This is where I do deeper dives. This is where I tell you things like, what could you do at home for an ear infection? Maybe you are a doctor as well, and you really want to learn more. We actually now are launching our professional development. Sign up for our professional development PEDS Connection quarterly newsletter. We are here to serve our community, and our community is the world. There's a lot happening in the world today, and we need community. You can ask us questions. We're going to give you the truth, but it's really important that we begin to have these conversations, talk about the things that are going on, and demand that we really look at the research and do the right research so that we know the long-term effects, so we know what happens to children that are vaccinated and children that are not. What's the correlation there? We have to do our due diligence and do the right thing for the generations to come. Thanks for tuning in. Be blessed.